I rise in support of Amendment 546, an amendment to increase funding for the Commonwealth's nonprofit security grant program for an additional $5 million. If this chamber remembers, in May, during our budget debate, we stood before all of you and we spoke out against the heinous and alarming rise in violence and bigotry against minority groups across our Commonwealth, targeted for who they love, the way they dress, the faith they practice, the color of their skin. And I'm sad to say that in just 2 short months, things have gotten much worse in Massachusetts and across the country. On June 3rd, a website launched that is home to the, quote, mapping project. The mapping project provides anyone, anywhere, with a, quote, interactive map that identifies the precise location of nearly 500 community organizations in Massachusetts. But when you look at the list of organizations, Mr. President, you'll notice that many are religious and cultural organizations serving the Jewish community. The map's creators, who are shielded by anonymity in the online world, characterize themselves as a, quote, multi-generational collective of activists and organizers. These so-called activists and organizers created this map to identify organizations that were complicit, or that they claimed were complicit, in the, quote, colonization of Palestine. According to the mapping project, and their definition of whatever this means, this would include organizations like the Anti-Defamation League, the Jewish Arts Collaborative, and the Jewish Teen Foundation of Greater Boston. Doesn't exactly sound like colonizers to me. Shortly after the website went live, Boston BDS, an anti-Israel group, promoted the list of organizations on their website and on their social media. Hundreds of schools, community groups, places of worship. Let me just ask the chamber this. How would you feel if a preschool where your kids went, or a religious institution where you prayed, or a school where your 5th grader or 6th grader attended, was listed on a website threatening Lord knows what? Despite the range of opinions that everyone is entitled to about Israel and Palestine and our country's role in that relationship, the existence of a public, user-friendly map that targets houses of worship, schools, community centers that have nothing to do with foreign policy is downright vicious. It's anti-Semitic, and it must be condemned in the strongest possible terms. But that's not all. Just a few weeks later, on July 2nd, we remember this, about 100 people, members of the white supremacist group Patriot Front, marched through downtown Boston. This racist mob was dressed in khaki pants, navy t-shirts, and hid their faces behind white neck gaiters, baseball hats, and sunglasses in Boston in the year 2022. They marched along significant historic spots right in the open, along the Freedom Trail. Some held Patriot Front flags, some held shields, some held a banner that said, quote, "Reclaim America." And that's not all. Those white supremacists that marched through downtown Boston assaulted a black man, shoving him to the ground. Again, we see this pattern over and over and over again, which is speech that starts online, moves into real life, and then moves into real violence that threatens people's safety and threatens people's lives. According to reporting in the Boston Globe, the Anti-Defamation League documented more than 600 incidents in Massachusetts involving Patriot Front. In 2022 alone, the Patriot Front destroyed Black Lives Matter statues and murals, stole and burned yard signs and flags celebrating diversity and the LGBTQ community, and distributed their racist propaganda at Jewish institutions. On their website, their manifesto reads, quote, I'm quoting them, "When our pre-Columbian forefathers left their European homes, they found a common cause and a common identity as Americans. From the varied nations and cultures of Europe, a new nation was forged in the flames of conquest. To be an American is to be a descendant of conquerors, pioneers, visionaries, and explorers. This unique identity was given to us by our ancestors, and this national spirit remains firmly rooted in our blood. Our mission is a hard reset on the nation we see today, a return to the traditions and virtues of our forefathers," end quote. Let me just repeat one particular phrase, hard reset. What exactly does that mean? I think we all have a sense of what that means. This organization is marching through the middle of Boston in broad daylight, vandalizing and threatening people. And as recently as last week, July 10th, signs were vandalized hanging outside of a construction site in Hyde Park for a future LGBTQ-friendly senior housing development. At least 10 signs were vandalized with hateful and homophobic messages. One read, quote, "Die slow," and another read, quote, "We will burn this." We're at a frightening place, an unacceptable place, Mr. President, in our Commonwealth. If anyone thinks that their doorstep or downtown, their neighborhood or their community is safe from threats of violence, the unfortunately reality is that none of this is just anecdote. People are being targeted as groups in their places of worship, in their community centers, and in their neighborhoods. They're being targeted as individuals because of the color of their skin, or the clothes that they wear, or the religion that they practice. That's why 5 years ago we came together in the Senate to create the Nonprofit Security Grant Program. And I want to thank our Senate President, the gentlelady from Ashland, our Ways and Means Chair, the gentleman from Westport, our Majority Leader, the gentlelady from Newton, our Senate President Emerita, the gentlelady from Worcester, my colleague, the gentlelady from Needham, for championing and pushing this issue forward. That program has provided millions in grants across the Commonwealth for vital security enhancements and protocols at houses of worship, community centers, and other institutions at risk of, frankly, domestic terrorism. In May, when we debated our annual budget, the Senate doubled the funding for this program from $1.5 million to $3 million, and also included language to ensure that grants were allocated with geographic equity in mind. We also established a new program in the budget, which was secured this week, $150,000 for a pilot program for security personnel that would support nonprofits at the highest risk of terrorist attacks or hate crimes. These grants would require a matching contribution from the nonprofit, but it can get up and running very quickly, and we're going to learn from that program about how we can continue to support those protections. And now today, in our economic development bill, we're creating an additional $5 million reserve for the Nonprofit Security Grant Program. The demand, the applications for this program far outstrip the available funds. This $5 million extra reserve in real money is going to make a tremendous difference. This increased funding is going to help our communities have the peace of mind that they deserve. Today, when acts of hate and violence have become so shockingly commonplace, when organizations are pleading for our help, we must marshal every resource at our disposal to make sure that people who feel vulnerable are getting the support that they need to feel safe in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.